What's up, guys? Hopefully you all are having a great day. Today, I wanted to do something on this channel that I haven't covered before, and not only that, but this is something that I have not seen any other YouTubers do for a Resident Evil video. Resident Evil has went on to make some of the best characters and storylines for a video game franchise. A lot of those characters and stories are heavily impacted due to some of the plot twists that are laid out within some of the Resident Evil games. So with all that being said, I went ahead and found 10 different Resident Evil plot twists throughout the series, and today I am going to be breaking down my top 10 Resident Evil plot twists. So sit back, relax, and join me for the top 10 Resident Evil plot twists.
Hey, I'm no ordinary civvy. I'm a member of STARS.
STARS?
So starting off at number 10, we've got the Betrayal of Nikolai Zinovy. Of course, your first thought when you see Nikolai is you get the impression that he's the leader of the UBCS, so of course he wouldn't be evil, right? But then you get to see him shoot one of his former UBCS members. Now granted, he did shoot this guy because he was already bit and most likely going to turn, so it was kind of a wise move on his part, but Jill Valentine interprets it as he could be evil because he's willing to kill a human while also being a human, of course. So to have Nikolai shoot this poor guy while he was still a human and not yet infected shows that Nikolai is a pretty heartless character, and he is willing to go above and beyond to do anything just to make sure that he survives. And of course, you later go on to find that Nikolai wants nobody to have this vaccine, while of course Jill Valentine and Carlos are doing everything in their power to make sure that this vaccine gets out to the rest of the world. We later go on to find out that he is indeed a traitor, and we leave him on Raccoon City where the bomb eventually hits, which I think is pretty good poetic justice for him.
I helped Simmons breach the president's security.
That sounds like Simmons, all right.
Why the hell would he do all this?
Long story.
Number 9 is going to be Ada Wong getting cloned in Resident Evil 6. One thing we definitely know about Resident Evil 6 is there is 4 different campaigns to choose from, so there's a lot of different stories that you can play in, and it's pretty confusing when you play a certain campaign and you can't really tell whether or not Ada is a clone. When you play Leon's story, you get to see a lot of Ada Wong and not much of her clone Carla. But if you're playing Chris or Jake or Ada's story, of course, you get to see a lot more of Carla. Derek Simmons is the one responsible for cloning Ada Wong in the first place. And if you're someone that only plays Chris Redfield's story in Resident Evil 6, then you wouldn't even know who Derek Simmons was, which would make you go on to believe that Carla is probably just Ada. But there is other sections of Resident Evil 6 that introduce you to Carla, and it kind of makes you look at her like, who is this strange lady that I'm seeing? But throughout playing Leon or Ada's campaign of Resident Evil 6, you will actually get to see that Ada does in fact get cloned into what becomes Carla, and later on becomes a really sick boss fight between Ada Wong and Carla.
Wesker.
She's so scary. I can't stand her.
Who? The woman here with Wesker?
That is Wesker.
Number 8 is Alex Wesker from Resident Evil Revelations 2. This is definitely one of those plot twists that as a fan, I don't think we ever would have asked for something like this, but when we got this in Revelations 2, I was so down for this storyline. I remember playing this game for the first time, and making it to that section of Revelations 2 was the ultimate holy moment when you actually get to this cutscene and Barry's all like, "What, that woman next to Wesker?" And then Natalia follows up with, "No, that is Wesker." Then that makes you realize that Wesker indeed has a sister. Resident Evil Revelations 2 isn't one of their biggest Resident Evil games, and it's definitely not one of their mainline games, but I think that this was a really underrated storyline in all of Revelations 2. The introduction to Alex was great, and the boss fight was pretty tense.
Leon! I got it!
Number 7 is when you find out that Louise Serra is working for Osmond Saddler in Resident Evil 4. When Leon finally meets Louise in RE4, they have a pretty decent talk, but it seems that Louise seemed to have left out a lot of valuable details in what he does in his personal life. It was a pretty big plot twist when we eventually go to find out that Louise is a researcher for Los Illuminados and is pretty much the person that feeds all the information to Saddler. But with Louise working for Saddler, he knew Saddler's intentions and he knew his exact agenda. Louise getting to witness firsthand just how devastating Los Illuminados was becoming, he felt pretty guilty for knowing just as much as Saddler and the rest of them did. And for Louise, it also ended up becoming an escape mission to get off this island, just like Leon with Ashley Graham. Despite Louise trying to make his escape off the island, he also did run into Leon Kennedy and Ashley Graham and started to build a bit of a connection with both of those characters. And you later go on to tell Louise about the severity of Los Illuminados and how not only Ashley but Leon as well is infected with the Los Illuminados. And as nice of a guy as Louise is, he went on into a failed attempt at trying to get the vaccines for Ashley and Leon because he knew truly just how bad and devastating it was to be a part of that Los Illuminados cult. That was a big plot twist to find out that he was more than just a foreigner.
So slow to catch on.
Now coming in at number 6 is Jill Valentine being brainwashed by Albert Wesker. This was a huge plot twist in Resident Evil 5 that I think should have been higher up on the list, but it was a pretty predictable plot twist throughout the entirety of RE5. As soon as the game starts, Chris Redfield has flashbacks of Jill Valentine and her opposive death that we never got to see until we finally play Lost in Nightmares in RE5. Because of Jill Valentine's death, that opens up Chris Redfield needing a new partner, which is the introduction to Sheva Alomar. But Chris Redfield starts to see signs that Jill Valentine may be alive somewhere, which opens up him now trying to find Jill Valentine and rescue her. So flashback to the events of Lost in Nightmares, and Chris Redfield would have very well not been alive anymore if it wasn't for Jill Valentine literally risking her life just to save her partner Chris. As we can see by the result of the fall, that Albert Wesker survived and Jill Valentine survived too for that matter. Now, I'd like to think that Wesker already had it planned in his mind that he could use Jill Valentine as some kind of evil sidekick, which is probably exactly why Jill Valentine survived that fall along with Wesker, because he wanted to keep her for future missions. So now fast forward to the events of RE5 and we see little snippets of this random cloaked character that we should have realized from the jump was Jill Valentine, even with the scene right there of Sheva going, wait, is that should have been our indicator that that was Jill Valentine. So as big of a plot twist as I think it was, I also feel like the game kind of spoiled it in little sections of trying to hint at it way too much and build it up. But regardless, the plot twist was a pretty good, memorable scene, and it takes place throughout the entirety of RE5, trying to find out whether or not Jill Valentine is alive or not. And in the end, all is well because Jill Valentine is no longer evil and she is very well alive.
Keep focused, brother. Our enemy is only a little girl. Oh, why is this taking so long?
My apologies, Alexia, but I have been doing my best.
Halfway into this list, and coming in at number 5, I decided to put the Ashford Clones from Resident Evil Code Veronica X. When playing Code Veronica X, we quickly discover that this Rockford Island is mainly kept active by the Ashford family. When playing Code Veronica X, one thing that we can quickly discover in the game is that Alex and Alexia are the children of Alexander Ashford. And as a matter of fact, Alex and Alexia are indeed twin siblings. But one thing that not only becomes news to us, but also becomes news to Alex Ashford, is that him and his twin sister have actually been clones this entire time. So it kind of goes to show that the Ashford family has a long history of using clones in their family to do their evil doings. But when Alex finally finds out that they have been clones, he finally is able to release a clone version of his twin sister, and when this clone Alexia does come out of the chamber, she notices that Alex is in his last dying breaths, so I think that enrages her to become one of the most mutated versions of the Ashfords that we will ever see. Finding out that they were clones was not only a plot twist to us fans, but it was for Alex and Alexia themselves.
It's okay.
Coming in at number 4 is Ethan being infected with the Molded, which is a huge plot twist that goes back from Resident Evil 7 and continues until Resident Evil 8 Village. I am a huge fan of the Resident Evil franchise, and as a matter of fact, I enjoy pretty much every single Resident Evil game there is, but when it comes to 7 and 8, I can't really say too many positive nor negative things about them, as I feel pretty neutral about both games. But I gotta give it up to Resident Evil 7 and 8 here for just having one of the best long-term storytellings in the entire franchise of Resident Evil. Throughout the entirety of Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8, it is a weird fact that Ethan Winters is able to reattach limbs so easily. Especially because as us fans, we had the impression that Ethan is supposed to be just a normal human being like the rest of us. But when we reach the end of RE8, we find out that thanks to Jack Baker, he is kept alive and able to regrow limbs thanks to being infected with the Molded.
So what he said was true? Hey, you can't keep walking away from me! I don't even know your name.
Ada Wong made her way into this top 10 list yet again, but this time she isn't so innocent. This one is when you find out that Ada is a spy in Resident Evil 2. This one is definitely an OG plot twist in the Resident Evil storyline. RE2 is the game that we got to see the introduction of Ada Wong, and we also got to watch as Leon met Ada Wong for the very first time. But this game also gives you a glimpse of who Ada Wong really is as a person, and why Leon goes on to not really trust her in the future Resident Evil games. You see, Ada Wong clearly fights for herself, and she works for the highest bidder. She seemed to have had plans to make sure that the sample of the virus wasn't going to get out into the general public's hands, so she ends up causing quite an inconvenience for Leon Kennedy, who is simply just trying to do the right thing. Me personally, I always thought that Ada Wong and Leon Kennedy were both some of my favorite characters in the entire RE franchise, so it's very unfortunate to see Ada Wong working on the opposite side of Leon. They've always had a real iffy relationship after the events of Raccoon City, and it's definitely thanks to this iconic plot twist in the series right here. Ada was always kinda shady in RE2, but to find out that she was working for Wesker was an insane plot twist.
What the hell?
Sorry, Ethan.
No! What? Why?
Right here, coming in at number 2, we've got Chris Redfield taking out Mia Winters. Again, I gotta give credit and respect to Resident Evil Village for actually being a really good storyline. At the very beginning, we get to witness Chris Redfield taking out Mia Winters, which gives you the illusion that Chris Redfield has now become evil. It's pretty great how they did it, because then it goes on to make you play the rest of the game kind of anticipating a Chris Redfield boss fight, or at least a Chris Redfield encounter of some kind that you know isn't gonna go very well. But in reality, when you finally do get a chance to meet up with Chris Redfield and have a good chat with him, he lets Ethan know that Mother Miranda has been behind all of this, and she has been able to cloak herself kind of like Mystique in a way, to make herself resemble any kind of human being. Which that perfectly explains why Chris Redfield tried to assassinate Mia, because in reality that was Mother Miranda and the real Mia Winters was being held hostage here. So at first we go on to think that Chris is becoming the new Wesker, but in reality he was actually the good guy in all of this and tried to save the whole Winters family.
Wesker.
So you've come. Chris, you make me proud. But of course you are one of my men.
Thanks. Since when, Wesker?
Coming in at the #1 plot twist in Resident Evil is the classic Wesker heel turn in Resident Evil 1. I love the stories and the directions that the developers went through when making these classic Resident Evil games, because this was back in a time where the developers were more devoted to making a banger video game and telling a story instead of having the best graphics around. So I have a lot of respect for some of the classic OG moments in the RE franchise, especially the idea to make Wesker become a bad guy, which eventually set the tone for a lot of the future Resident Evil games, including CVX and RE5. And it's also without a doubt in my opinion that Chris Redfield and Albert Wesker had the best rivalry in all the RE franchise, and this game is the birth of that rivalry. And unlike other video games where they kind of spoil or hint at the plot twist way too much, this game did a great job at keeping it a pretty good secret up until the very end. We spend the entirety of the game searching through the Spencer mansion, which at the time we had no clue was the father of Albert Wesker, so in reality Wesker would know his entire way around this place. And throughout our playthrough of RE1, we find our fellow STARS members incapacitated or in need of help in some way or form. It is a complete mystery as to why our fellow STARS members are dropping like flies, but when we come to realize that Wesker is behind all of this, it all makes total sense. And with all that being said, that just about does it for my top 10 Resident Evil plot twists. I had a lot of fun going through and refreshing my knowledge of the Resident Evil franchise and trying to find 10 different plot twists to compile together in this top 10 list. But I did kind of struggle to find 10 different plot twists, so I'd love to hear if there's any more plot twists throughout the RE franchise that you guys can think about and are worth sharing. So of course, please go down in the comments below, share any plot twists that you think I might have missed, and let your voices be heard. Lastly, I have recently joined the YouTube Partner Program, so before closing this off, I'd like to send a special shout out to my one and only pro member, IcoPro Sam. I post pretty frequently, so if you guys want to check out daily Resident Evil content, make sure you hit subscribe, and with that being said, I will see you guys in the next video tomorrow. Peace.